My parents made me take the bus to my graduation while buying my sister a Tesla. I sat at the bus stop, clutching tightly the bouquet I had bought myself. White roses wrapped in cheap paper, but carefully tied with a purple ribbon. I was wearing my graduation gown ironed flat since last night, collar neat, cap sitting perfectly, the tassel gently swaying with the morning breeze. The sunlight today was soft, pale gold, the kind of light perfect for commemorative photos. The only regret was, no one was here with me to take those pictures. I glanced at my phone screen, still glowing with a message from early morning, from my father. "Hey sweetie, you'll have to take the bus today. We're finalizing the Tesla handover for your sister. Hope you understand." I had read that line at least 5 times, but each time my heart tightened as if it was the first. No congratulations, no apologies. Just a fact stated in a gentle tone, as if it were no big deal. I opened Facebook. Don't open it, I told myself. Yet my hand clicked on my mother's profile as if hypnotized. 3 new photos had been posted less than 20 minutes ago. The first was a white Tesla Model Y, so shiny it reflected the clear blue sky above. The second was Kayla, my little sister, beaming brightly, posing beside the car like she had just won a beauty pageant. Short dress, red lipstick, hand raised in a V sign, captioned, "Number Tesla Queen." The last photo was the whole family, dad, mom, sister. And the car. No me. Of course, no me. Below was a caption, short and sharp enough to pierce my chest. Couldn't be prouder. Big day for our baby girl. I did not cry. Not because I was strong, but because that pain had become too familiar. Like an old scar, it no longer bled, but still ached whenever someone touched it. I stared at that caption for a while, then turned off the phone. My eyes stung but were dry. I was not hurting because I had to take the bus. I had taken the bus hundreds of times in the past 4 years to work, to school, going back silently. But today, when the whole world was wearing graduation robes and taking photos with their families, I, once again, sat here alone, as usual. The bus arrived. I stood up, lifted the gown off the step, and stepped onto the bus. The door closed behind me with a heavy thud. No one waited for me on the other side. No one waved my name from the audience seats. But I would still step onto the stage, not because of them, but because of me. Before I tell you how I rebuilt my life after that pain, please leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. If your family has ever disappointed you when you needed them most, please subscribe and follow me, because sometimes being left behind is the motivation we need to move forward. My name is Alyssa, and I am 22 years old. I grew up in a small town about a little over 30 minutes drive from Lexington, Kentucky, the kind of town people often call a peaceful place to live, meaning nothing ever really changes. It was so small that everyone knew each other, even the names of the neighbors' cats, and every Friday evening, people would gather to watch high school football games at the old stadium. My father, Mark Miller, worked for a company that repaired air conditioning and heating systems, a stable job enough to pay the monthly bills. My mother, Sharon Miller, was an assistant at a dental clinic nearby, basically serving as a receptionist who managed appointments and handled patient records. Both of them were the kind of people who believed life only needed enough to eat, enough to wear, and a little weekend joy. I remember my childhood home clearly. A 2-story white house with green wooden window frames, the front lawn meticulously trimmed every Saturday morning by my father. My room was small, painted light blue, with a bed, a small study desk, and an old bookshelf filled with books I had collected from the library or bought discounted from the town's used bookstore. Across from my room was Kayla's, my little sister's, painted bright pink, with a princess bed, unicorn-printed curtains, and full of expensive gifts. From an early age, Kayla was called our little princess by our parents. Her birthdays were always a big event. When Kayla turned 8, Mom threw the biggest unicorn party in the neighborhood, inviting more than 30 children, renting a horse-drawn carriage for her to ride around, and a 3-tiered cake covered in glitter. My own birthdays were usually just a small dinner, sometimes a hastily bought cake from the convenience store nearby. No guests, no balloons, and certainly no TikTok live streams like Kayla always had. Still, I told myself it didn't matter. What mattered was that I would prove myself through my studies and achievements. But every time I brought home an award certificate, everything always played out in the same strangely familiar way. I remember one Friday afternoon when I won first place in the Kentucky State Math competition for high school students. I brought home the small trophy and certificate, full of pride and excitement. But when I proudly showed them to Mom, she only smiled briefly and gently said, "Great job, honey. But can you unload the dishwasher now?" Before I could reply, Dad was sitting on the sofa, watching the game, absent-mindedly nodding. "Yeah, that's nice. You know your sister is not good with school, let her have her moment." And what was that moment? It was that Kayla had just posted a new video on TikTok that got 200 likes. I said nothing more and quietly took the trophy and certificate back to my room, placing them on the bookshelf as usual. That feeling was like a shadow I could never escape, no matter how hard I tried. I was never the top priority in my parents' eyes. Their words, too, were like wounds that never healed. One time, while I was reading a book about financial investment on the old sofa in the living room, Mom walked by, looked at me for a moment, then shook her head. "You're just too serious, Alyssa. Why don't you try to smile more?" I looked up and forced a smile, but Mom walked away. I wondered why being serious about studying and thinking about the future was seen as a flaw. But the words that hurt me the most came at a family party when a relative praised my academic achievements. Dad just shrugged and laughed lightly. "Not everything's about grades, Alyssa. Kayla's the one who lights up the room." That phrase echoed in my mind throughout that night. I understood that no matter how hard I tried, I could never change my parents' perspective. I was not the one who could make them smile or feel proud. I was just the eldest daughter, good at doing housework and always there when they needed me. It was during those days that I began to dream of a different life, a place where I wouldn't have to constantly prove my worth to people who never truly cared. Starting at age 15, I began working part-time at a small coffee shop near home, saving every penny. I read every finance book I could find from Warren Buffett to Suze Orman. Each page was a new world where I found hope and motivation to change my fate. Throughout those lonely high school years, I was fortunate to meet Mr. Bennett, the math teacher at school. He was the only person who truly noticed and believed in me. One day after class, when I stayed behind to ask about a difficult problem, he said gently but firmly, "Alyssa, you know what? You don't belong here. And that is the best thing that could happen to you." I have never forgotten his words because for the first time in my life, I felt seen. I knew there was only one way to escape this life, to find a different path for myself. A path without bias, without disappointed looks, and without anyone calling me too serious or too ambitious. I quietly began searching for opportunities, applying for scholarships, preparing documents, studying day and night, hoping that one day I could leave this place and become the person I always dreamed of. I never forgot the night I sent my first application. It was a cold November Friday evening, the chill wrapping the small town near Lexington like an icy blanket. The whole house was noisy, gathered around the Kentucky Wildcats versus Louisville Cardinals football game, while I locked my door and hunched over the old laptop that had been with me throughout high school. I remember my fingers trembling slightly as I moved the cursor over the submit button, my first application to the University of Michigan, Economics. I had prepared for this moment for a long time. A girl living in the Miller household like me never dared to dream of going to college far from home, let alone a prestigious school like that. But for me, college was not just a degree, it was the only key to escape this suffocating life, away from Kayla's shadow and the familiar words I heard every day. 2 months later, when the acceptance email arrived with a partial scholarship offer, I sat quietly in my room, unable to believe my eyes. Emotions surged in my chest, a mix of joy and fear. I took a deep breath, printed out the confirmation email, and decided to tell my parents at dinner. That night, Mom prepared beef stew and garlic bread, a special meal to celebrate Kayla's first million views on TikTok. My parents and Kayla were happily talking about the comments Kayla had received, saying she was the next big star. I sat silently, waiting for a moment to speak. Finally, I placed the printed email on the dinner table. I got accepted to the University of Michigan. They gave me a partial scholarship. I will start studying this fall. The room fell into sudden silence. Kayla raised her eyebrows in confusion. Mom put down her spoon and stared at me as if I had just said something ridiculous. Dad broke the tension. University of Michigan? You think you're better than us now? He laughed mockingly, his tone laced with sarcasm sharp enough to make my heart ache. I tried to stay calm. I just want a chance. Mom sighed softly, cutting me off. If you leave, who will help me with the housework? Who will take care of Kayla? Don't you think about anyone but yourself? Kayla pouted. You think a big school changes anything? You'll end up unemployed anyway. I lowered my head, folded the paper, trying to swallow back the tears welling up. I realized then they would never truly be happy for me. I arrived in Ann Arbor in August, the sky clear and blue, sunlight casting golden hues over the towering trees. My tiny dorm was tucked in a corner of the campus, cramped and damp. I shared a room with Lily, a design student. Marcus, a pre-med guy, lived right next door. We quickly became close friends, calling ourselves the survivors, surviving on instant noodles, discounted sandwiches at day's end, and cups of coffee just enough to stay awake for 3 hours. I worked at Gracie's Subs, a small eatery a few blocks from campus. When I wasn't at Gracie's, I was at the library, shelving books, tidying study tables, earning every little bit to pay off the remaining tuition. My schedule was packed: morning classes, afternoon shifts, late nights studying until my eyes blurred from exhaustion. On nights when I was too tired, I'd fall asleep leaning on my desk, still hearing my mother's soft voice. Don't you think about anyone but yourself? Sometimes I wondered if they ever called to check on me. But every time my phone lit up, it was Mom texting, "Can you pay the electricity bill for me this month? Money's tight." Or Dad texting, "The water heater is broken. Can you check repair prices?" No one asked how I was eating or how my studies were going. To them, I was always the remote support, a convenient hotline they only remembered when in need. But I didn't give up. I had grown used to standing outside the family spotlight, so I decided to light my own life. Semester after semester, my GPA never dipped below 3.9. Every night, I stayed late in the library, reading hundreds of pages, mastering every financial concept and lecture. Gradually, professors began to notice me. Professor Andrews, head of the economics department, invited me to join a community financial research program and encouraged me to develop an app to help low-income students manage their finances. I wrote a 10-page proposal and submitted it to a startup fund. When I received the congratulatory email saying my idea was selected, I just sat silently in my tiny dorm room. I cried for the first time in many years. No one at home knew about it. I didn't bother to tell them either. I had already walked so far away that they no longer saw me. In my final year, I was accepted into an advanced internship program at Green Cap Investment in Austin, Texas, one of the leading companies in green finance. Lily hugged me tightly. Marcus slapped my shoulder enthusiastically, both shouting with joy as if they were the ones accepted. Meanwhile, the only message I received from my parents was still, "Dad needs you to check the price to repair the water heater. Please reply quickly, we urgently need it." I had grown used to that. Deep inside, I no longer expected anything. They didn't understand me, they never tried to. I had learned to walk alone and never regretted it. My life now, though difficult, finally belonged to me. I was no longer Alyssa Miller as they knew her. I had rewritten my own story, not with meaningless words from family, but with every step I took to overcome challenges on my own. I would keep moving forward. And I knew the path ahead was meant just for me. I flew back from Michigan to Kentucky 2 days before graduation. For the first time in 4 years away from home, I truly wanted to come back. Not to boast, but simply because deep down I still held a small hope that this time would be different. That when I stepped onto that stage, someone would smile from the audience, proudly call my name, and say they were glad I was part of their life. I had prepared everything carefully. A white envelope containing a blue invitation card, the color of the University of Michigan, elegantly printed with my name in the center line. Alyssa Miller, Bachelor of Economics, Honors Graduate. I also printed a campus map clearly marking the graduation ceremony location, booked a hotel room in Ann Arbor, and reserved a table at an Italian restaurant that I had saved up for months to afford. The moment I walked through the door, my parents both smiled. Mom hugged me and spoke in a rare, gentle voice. "Well, you're home. The house feels empty without you." My heart lightened a little. Maybe, after all, they had begun to see my presence as more important. I handed them the envelope, my voice tinged with nervousness. "I've prepared everything. Here's the invitation, the map, and the schedule. I booked a hotel very close to the school, and there's a table reserved at the Italian restaurant. You don't have to worry about anything, just come." Dad smiled and nodded approvingly. "Of course. How could we miss such an important day for you?" My heart softened. It had been a long time since I'd heard such words from him. I turned to my sister, Kayla, who was sitting on the sofa, absorbed in her phone, her expression indifferent. I gently asked, "You're coming too, right, Kayla?" She shrugged and glanced at me reluctantly. Do we really have to sit through that boring ceremony? I was momentarily stunned, but chose to ignore it. I was used to Kayla's indifference. What mattered was that Mom and Dad had agreed to come. For me, that was enough. The night before graduation, I lay awake almost the entire night, imagining the scene the next day, me in my gown, standing on the stage, searching through the crowd, hoping for the first time in my life to see my parents waving, their eyes filled with pride instead of cold indifference. The happiness inside me was overwhelming, a feeling I had waited for since childhood. But that joy was fleeting. On graduation morning, I woke early, carefully dressed in my gown, and walked down to the kitchen, my heart pounding like a child's first day at school. Mom, Dad, and Kayla were already seated at the breakfast table. The atmosphere was so strange that I froze at the kitchen door. Mom looked up at me, hesitated briefly, then said, "Sweetheart, there's been a last-minute change. Please understand." My heart immediately pounded hard, all the joy seemed to freeze. Before I could say anything, Dad interrupted. "The Tesla dealership just called. They're delivering the car earlier than expected. We have to take Kayla to pick it up today. The schedule can't be changed." I looked at Dad, my voice choking with disbelief. "But what about my graduation? You promised you'd be there." Mom looked at me, trying to reassure me with a forced smile, her eyes flickering away. "You'll be fine taking the Greyhound bus, won't you? You're used to taking the bus." Kayla lifted her head, excitement on her face, cutting in as if this were no big deal. "I've been waiting for this day forever. You won't make it hard for me, right, Alyssa?" The pain surged, burning in my chest. I couldn't speak. I just nodded quietly and turned my back to leave the house. I walked quickly down the quiet little street to the bus stop. The morning sunlight blurred in my eyes, my long, lonely shadow stretching along the empty road. As soon as I sat down on the bench at the station, my phone vibrated softly. A post from my mother's Facebook appeared. With trembling hands, I tapped on it. A photo of Kayla standing radiant beside a brand new white Tesla. Her smile shone brighter than the summer sun. Below the photo was my mother's caption. "She deserves the best. Thank you, Mark, for making this dream come true. Number Kayla drives Tesla." Not a single word mentioned me. No congratulations, no apology for not being by my side on one of the most important days of my life. The bus arrived. I stepped on, found an empty seat by the window. I watched familiar houses and streets pass by, my heart empty. Inside my mind, a soft but clear voice whispered, "They say I'm strong enough to take the bus alone. But what they don't say is that I'm strong enough to leave their lives forever." That day, I walked onto the stage in silence. No one waved, no one called my name from the crowd. Yet I walked steadily forward, receiving my diploma with my own two hands. Because, after all, I understood that what I needed was not recognition from those who never made me a priority. What I truly needed was the strength to walk alone, without ever looking back. Graduation day passed in my own quiet solitude. After stepping down from the stage, I returned to the dorm, packed my things, and prepared to move to Austin, where Green Cap had invited me to work full-time. The first days in Austin were busy and overwhelming, but gradually I found a small corner I could call home. 3 weeks after settling into my new life, my phone lit up. I saw my mother's name on the screen, and a small flicker of hope sparked inside me. Maybe they wanted to check on me. Maybe they finally realized their mistakes. I took a deep breath and answered, "Hello, Mom." Her voice came quickly, gentle as usual, but this time with an unusual hesitation and caution. "Alyssa, what are you doing? Are you okay?" I felt a slight relief, but before I could respond, she continued. "Since you're working and earning now, your father and I are planning to buy a piece of land with a friend, but we're short on the deposit. Could you contribute a bit?" I stood still, gripping the phone tightly. Not a word asking if I liked my new job. Not a single congratulation on the career I had just begun. Once again, I was merely a convenient source of money to them. I slowly asked back, my voice noticeably cold. "You're calling me just to ask for money?" My mother paused for a moment, then her tone instantly became sharp. "What kind of words are those? Who raised you to speak like that? Now that you have some achievements, you look down on your family?" Each word she said cut straight into my heart like a knife. The years of loneliness, hardship, and self-reliance turned into a debt I had to repay. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "What did you raise me with? With invisibility? Or with the words, 'You have a sister now, so you have to endure'? Have you ever really seen me?" My mother was silent. Then Dad's voice came through the line, filled with anger and disappointment. "You're disrespectful, you've forgotten your roots. From now on, you're a stranger to this family." His words felt like the final blow shattering the last piece of hope I had left. I gently closed my eyes, then spoke softly but firmly, surprising even myself. "No, Dad, I haven't forgotten my roots. I've just learned not to beg for love anymore." I hung up and set the phone down on the table. The small room fell into silence. I sat still like a statue, a strange mixture of exhaustion and peace washing over me. In that moment, I knew I would never look back again. That night, I booked a plane ticket and moved permanently to a small apartment in a quieter neighborhood in Austin. I told no one. No goodbyes, no tears, no regrets. I opened my laptop and wrote an email accepting an invitation from the University of Michigan to be a guest speaker in a program for students suffering from emotional abuse within their own families. Pressing send, I exhaled deeply. It was not running away. It was freedom. A year has passed since the day I stood alone at the bus stop in my graduation gown, tears blurring my eyes as I realized I had never been a priority. But now, sitting by the window of my small apartment in Austin, watching the sunset stretch over the streets I have walked myself, I know I made the right choice. On my desk is the graduation photo, me standing beside Lily and Marcus, all three of us smiling brightly. None of them share my blood, yet they are the family I call my own. They never demanded anything, never treated love like a transaction. And above all, they never abandoned me. I once thought walking alone meant failure. I believed that if no one applauded, victory lost its meaning. But today, I understand that walking alone has never been failure. It was the first step toward true freedom, toward a life where I don't have to shrink myself to fit anyone else's expectations. I opened my phone and, for the first time in over a year, publicly posted that graduation photo. No tags, no names mentioned. Just a short caption. A year later, I realize walking alone is not failure. It is the first step on the path back to freedom. I put my phone down without waiting for praise or validation. I had already received enough recognition from myself. If you find yourself caught between what your family expects and what your heart truly desires, I hope you know you have the right to choose. You have the right to walk away, even if it means walking alone. Not because you are selfish, but because you deserve a life where you don't have to shrink to fit others' expectations. Leave a comment if this story touched you. And if you are walking that difficult path, remember you are not alone. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away even when the ones you leave behind should have been the ones who loved you the most.